They told me to be quiet, smile politely, and dress like a lady. And for years, I did. Until one night, one sentence on my shirt turned me into a family disgrace. But what they saw as shame was the beginning of me finding my voice. I'm Lena, 14 years old, and if there's one thing I've learned this year, it's this. Some people will hate you simply because you refuse to live by the script they wrote for you, before you were even born. I'm not a rebellious kid, but I'm also not the ideal granddaughter my grandma once dreamed of. When she found out I was a girl, she told my mom, finally, a little princess to spoil. She bought lace dresses, patent leather shoes, sparkly bracelets, even a full pastel pink toy kitchen. She wanted me to be one of those catalog kids, always smiling, always polite, always saying yes ma'am to every adult in the room. But I wasn't like that. I hated frilly dresses. I didn't play with dolls or host pretend tea parties. I liked books, documentaries, and videos explaining income inequality, climate change, and human rights. Lately, I've been reading a lot about social justice movements. And yes, according to Grandma, I've become one of those kids who's clearly going to grow up to be an activist. Her words, not a compliment. My dad used to live in her world. Mansions, private schools, bottomless bank accounts. But then, he dropped out of college, refused to join the family business, and the cracks began to show. When he fell in love with my mom, who Grandma referred to as from the wrong side of society, she cut him off completely. Like love was a crime punishable by credit card cancellation. Now we live an ordinary life, sometimes a bit tight but full. We're not poor, but we live nothing like Grandma's side of the family. I wear secondhand clothes. My mom cooks at home, instead of taking us out to fancy restaurants. And our vacations? Usually just park picnics, not five-star resorts. I've never been ashamed of that, until I was standing at the gates of Grandma's mansion on her 68th birthday, wearing a black t-shirt with bold white letters that read, "Eat the rich." I knew it would get a reaction. I'm not naive. But I didn't wear it to be disrespectful. I wore it because it said something I believed. That turning a blind eye to unjust wealth is more shameful than calling it out. And if a shirt could make someone stop and think, or at least hear what I had to say, then it deserved to be worn. Before we got in the car, Mom looked at me. She raised her brow slightly, but said nothing. Just asked, "Are you sure?" I nodded. "Mom, I don't hate Grandma, but I'm not going to fake it just to be accepted," she sighed. "Then be yourself." I didn't think the shirt would blow up the whole party. But it wasn't just a shirt. To them, it was an insult. To me, it was a shield. Protecting the truth I carry in a house where everything sparkles, except honesty. I don't know if I was brave or just foolish in that moment. All I know is, the second I stepped through that door, I carried with me everything they've spent their whole lives trying to deny. And I was about to be devoured for it. The moment I stepped through the heavy, polished glass doors of Grandma's mansion, I knew I had entered someone else's stage. The air felt like a theater, where everyone was performing the role they'd been assigned. Grandma played the matriarch of the dynasty. Grandpa, the quiet but intimidating figure. And all the children and grandchildren stood in their designated places, smiling at the right moments, speaking just enough to keep the dinner perfectly undisturbed. I didn't have a role in that play. I was just the girl in the wrong costume, and I knew it the second I saw Grandma's eyes. She rose from a velvet red sofa, wrapped in a deep purple gown covered in sequins, heels sparkling like she was royalty on her own throne. Her gaze scanned me head to toe, stopping dead at the words across my chest. "Eat the rich." No words, no outburst. Just a subtle frown, barely there, but enough to erase me from the room. Mom gently squeezed my hand, as if to say, "Don't worry," but she didn't say anything either. Dad avoided looking at me completely, eyes fixed on the dining table like he was analyzing furniture layout. Dinner was as grand as ever, silverware shining, wine poured with precision, white linens crisp without a single wrinkle. Every dish had a French name, one I had to Google just to find out it was some kind of beef stew with mushrooms. I sat next to Mom. Across from me was Emma, my cousin, and the walking embodiment of everything Grandma had hoped I'd become. Blonde hair, soft floral dress, polished shoes, and a voice like a toothpaste commercial. She stared at my shirt, wide-eyed, then wrinkled her nose. "That shirt is kind of weird, right?" she said loudly enough for the entire table to hear. I looked up and met her gaze. "It's not weird, it's just honest." Emma pursed her lips. Grandpa broke the silence with a small chuckle. "Come on, Emma, that shirt just means you'll be the only one inheriting our fortune someday." A few adults around the table laughed. I didn't. Mom looked down and quietly cut her meat, her hands trembling slightly. It felt like someone had poured cold water over me right there at the steaming dinner table. Dad stayed quiet, didn't even glance at me. I turned to Mom, about to whisper, "Can we leave now?" But right then, Grandma set down her wine glass and spoke, her voice like a knife. "It's a shame you've let her become so disrespectful. No wonder she and I were never close. That wasn't meant for me, it was a shot fired straight at my mother, and I, the one being humiliated, was treated like background noise." I opened my mouth. "I'm not disrespectful. I just... number. The adults are talking." "Be quiet," Grandma cut me off, not even bothering to look at me. The room was packed, but I felt like I'd just been thrown out of a world I was never truly invited into. I looked at Dad, waiting for something but a raised brow. Don't talk to her like that." Nothing. His silence hurt more than Grandma's words. Mom put down her utensils and pushed her chair back. "We're leaving." Her voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to cut through the noise and freeze the room. I stood up and walked away from the table without looking back. Each step felt like dragging a weight of shame behind me. But strangely, I didn't cry. I just felt empty. On the way to the car, Mom didn't say a word. Neither did I. It wasn't until the engine started that I turned to look back at the mansion. Its lights still glowing, laughter still echoing, the dinner still going strong. And I knew I would never belong there. Not because of the shirt, but because they never truly wanted me there to begin with. The car rolled steadily down the road, but nothing could quiet the storm inside me. I sat with my shoulder pressed against the window, watching the streetlights streak past like fleeting glances from the people I'd left behind. People who knew how to smile at the right moments, say the right things, and tear down a child's dignity just because she didn't dress like they did. Mom drove in silence. I knew she was angry, but I wasn't sure. Angry at Grandma, or at me. I didn't dare ask. I didn't want to cry either. But my throat was tight, like someone had tied a string around my chest and was pulling, bit by bit. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. My voice came out dry, almost hollow. "I know you were embarrassed." Mom paused for a second, eyes still on the road. "What?" "The shirt. What I said. The way I reacted. The way everyone looked at me. They didn't have to say it. I saw it. They think I'm rude. And you stayed quiet." She didn't answer right away. Her hands gripped the wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. Then she let out a long breath. "I wasn't embarrassed by you." "Really? Really?" She glanced at me, her eyes catching the light from an oncoming car. "I was hurting for you, because you had to go through that, because once again, they used respect as a weapon to silence someone who dared to speak up." I bit my lip. Tears welled up, no matter how hard I tried to swallow them back. "Then why didn't you say anything?" I almost shouted. "When Grandma told me to be quiet, when everyone laughed at me, Dad didn't say a word. No one did. You just said I wasn't wrong, so why didn't you say that then?" Mom turned down a quiet road and pulled over to the curb. She shut off the engine. Silence. She sat there, breathing for a long moment, then turned to me. Because I used to be you, Lena. I frowned. What do you mean? I stood in that same house, in your exact place. I didn't speak the same way, didn't dress the right way, didn't fit their mold. I wore a dress your grandma hated. I once pushed back on something your grandpa said. I cried in the bathroom because someone called me a trashy girl from nowhere. Her voice cracked. And I stayed silent because back then I thought being quiet was the only way to survive. But you did what I never could. You spoke up. You stood your ground. You held your head high in a room full of people who wanted to break you. That broke me. I cried, not out of anger, but from a deep sadness I couldn't hold back anymore. I just wanted to be myself, I choked out. I wasn't trying to cause trouble. But I also can't pretend everything's okay just because they're rich and older. Mom nodded, tears falling down her cheeks, and she didn't wipe them away. You're not wrong, Lena. That shirt you wore didn't hurt anyone. But it made them uncomfortable. Because it reminded them of something they've spent their lives avoiding, that the world isn't fair. And you were a mirror they didn't want to look into. We sat like that in the car. No more words, just the sound of two hearts beating, and the sense that, for the first time, Mom and I were standing on the same side. I whispered, "Do you think Dad's on my side?" Mom was quiet for a long moment, then softly said, "Your dad grew up in that world. Even though he left it, part of him never truly escaped. And that part is scared. Not because you're wrong, but because you dared to do something he never had the courage to do." I nodded, eyes still full of tears. "I'm not going to apologize for the shirt." Mom smiled and brushed my hair back gently. "And I don't ever want you to." We pulled away from the curb and headed home. The streetlights reflected off the windshield like little bursts of light. But this time, I didn't look away. I looked straight into them, like I was staring into my own future. And I knew I wasn't alone anymore. The next morning, I woke up with my eyes still a little puffy, but the weight on my chest was no longer a boulder pressing me down like the night before. It felt lighter. Not because everything was okay, but because, for the first time, I knew I wasn't the one who was wrong. And more importantly, I wasn't alone in being right. Mom had left a handwritten note on the kitchen table. "There's toast and eggs in the oven. Don't forget your jacket. It's getting windy." Mom. I read that little note over and over, like it was an apology she didn't need to say out loud. There was no, "Sorry I didn't defend you last night, but I got it." Everything she said in the car, that was all I had ever needed from her. Someone who stood beside me when an entire house turned its back. After breakfast, I went to my room and opened the closet. The layered dresses Grandma had bought me when I was younger were still tucked, neatly, in the bottom drawer, along with a few other pieces I never wore, but couldn't bring myself to throw out. On the top shelf, the Eat the Rich shirt was folded neatly, but I didn't wear it today. Not because I regretted it, but because I didn't need it anymore. Not as a shield. I pulled on an old gray hoodie and a pair of faded jeans. Hair tied up in a messy bun, no makeup. I wanted people to see me. No slogans, no statements, no spotlight. And still know I was enough. At school, no one knew what happened at Grandma's birthday dinner, but I carried it with me all day, like a bruise you can't see but still feel every time you move. During lunch, I got a text from Emma. "Emma, are you going to wear that shirt every time we see the family? Auntie says you did it on purpose." I stared at the message, then locked my phone. No reply. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to explain. Didn't feel the need to defend myself. I hadn't worn the shirt to make a scene. I wore it because it was honest. And if the truth made someone uncomfortable, that was their problem, not mine. That night, Dad came home late. He was quieter than usual. Didn't ask how my day was, didn't bring up the party. Maybe he was hoping it would all just fade away like a bad dream. But I couldn't forget. I wasn't as angry at him as I thought I'd be. I was more angry at how he disappeared when I needed him most. But now, I could see the fear in his eyes, and I understood. Maybe his silence wasn't agreement with Grandma. Maybe it was shame. The quiet kind that comes from having to choose between your daughter and the mother who raised you inside a mold. I didn't need an apology from him, but I wished, someday, he'd have the courage to say, "I'm proud of you for not being like them." Before bed, I stood in front of the mirror. Still me. Messy hair, unwashed face, dark circles under my eyes. No lipstick, no glow from a camera flash. But in the reflection, I saw something I'd never seen so clearly before. A girl who no longer needed to be accepted. I wasn't perfect. I was still awkward, still emotional, still figuring it out. But I wasn't pretending anymore. And maybe that's a kind of growing up no fancy party will ever give you. The next morning, Mom walked into my room holding a new shirt. Not a dress, not a tutu, just a plain white t-shirt with a small line printed over the left chest. "Use your voice even if it shakes." I looked at her. She didn't say anything. Just smiled, laid the shirt gently on my bed, and walked away. But I understood. She was telling me that, no matter how badly the world wants me to stay quiet, she'd be the first one to listen when I speak. I wore the shirt to school that day. No one commented, no one laughed. But one student walked past me in the hallway, paused, glanced at the words on my shirt, and gave me a soft, knowing nod. Maybe not everyone will understand, but the ones who do, they'll stay. And that, to me, was more than enough. I used to think that in order to be respected, I had to make everyone happy, speak properly, dress appropriately, sit still and smile politely when adults were talking. Stay silent, even when everything inside me was screaming. I tried. I really did. I wore the floral dresses. I practiced soft smiles, avoided reactions, tried to be the good girl they wanted me to be. But the more I tried, the more I felt myself disappear. Like every time I gave in, a piece of me was erased, wiped off the map of this world. And then, just one t-shirt, one sentence, one dinner party. It didn't just expose the truth about my relationship with Grandma. It tore off the mask I'd been wearing just to keep the peace. After that night, I stopped wanting peace if it meant losing myself. I wanted to be real, even if that made someone frown, even if it made others uncomfortable. I've come to understand that not everyone will get me, not everyone will like me, or even care to hear what I have to say. But I've also learned that respect isn't something you ask for. It's something you claim by standing tall in your truth. Because if I don't speak up for what I believe in, who will? If I don't feel confident in my own body, my own thoughts, my own voice, then I'm just a shadow in someone else's story. I don't need anyone to hand me my worth. I give it to myself. That weekend night, as I sat under the warm glow of my desk lamp reading a book, Mom peeked into my room. She didn't ask what I was reading. She didn't bring up the dinner party or the message Grandma had sent afterward. She just stood at the door for a moment, looking at me, and then quietly said, "I never taught you how to raise your voice, but you learned on your own. And I'm so proud of you." I didn't say anything. I just smiled. Not the kind of smile to make someone else feel comfortable, but a real one, for myself.